especially with my daughter, like I realize, and I'm trying to be very aware of it, like that she is a person too. And I particularly, I think with parents, like parents don't treat kids like they're people at all. Like it's like we're just giving them all this information, especially it's not, and I think it's changing as the time's going along. But I definitely have those moments where I have to realize that like, oh, I'm over talking to her, and like she doesn't need to listen. Like it's just okay, and like things can just be, or I hear her thoughts. Well, also too with my daughter, she has open reign to ask me why for anything. You know, no matter what I'm telling her, she can always ask me why.
Devin, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you. It is nice to be here. Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. So to start off all these conversations, as we asked you in the lead up, tip to navigating difficult conversations. Mm-hmm. And we've had a guest on who studies listening for a living.
Oh, wow.
To which was your answer, was to listen. And he informed us of the 46 different ways that have been studied that people listen. So listening is such a complicated, as easy as sometimes it seems like it should be, it is incredibly complicated. What is your tip or way? I shouldn't say tip. What is the way that you will go about making sure that you're listening to what other people are saying?
Yeah. So I think like from the physical point, like sometimes I just literally bite my lip so it stops my urge to want to talk, and interject. I think that's the first thing that I do. But then after that, like I shut off the voice in my head, because I guess pretty much when we're talking, we're always thinking, and there's a voice in my head that's waiting to talk. So I just literally shut it off and listen to every word that they're saying, like word by word. Like they'll say a word and I'm thinking that word. But those are the two things I definitely do. And then I just take a pause because I realize that when people are talking, they pause. It's always pauses, and then sometimes people wait. Like, oh, I got a brief second. Let me just say something right there. So then I'll just pause. So sometimes it'll be like a lapse in time almost. It's just like it feels like a long awkward pause. But those are just a few things I do just to like listen more to what people are trying to say.
How did you teach yourself to redirect your thinking to an attention on what they're saying? How did you do that?
I guess just thought, just realizing that there was a voice inside of me that wanted to cut people off, and just also just seeing people cut each other off as well. And I mean, maybe it's because of my background, or how I grew up, where people were always arguing for something, and I just realized people weren't listening. So I think I just thought about it. I wish I could tell you there was like this moment, excuse me, when I came to that epiphany, but it kind of just came over time.
Devin, when you're in a conversation like this one, do you still notice when you're thinking and you redirect, or is it just an automatic thing? Are there times where you don't do it, or is it pretty automatic for you now?
No, I wouldn't say it's automatic. I do have to consciously do it still. And I can tell that when I'm like more emotional about something, I have to be really cognizant of it. Because then it's kind of like at times it could feel like a fight. So I have to like, really redirect myself. Sometimes it does happen, like naturally. But without a doubt, like when I'm upset or just feeling emotional about something, I have to really like bunker down and like focus on listening.
It's interesting. So you're very clear on these three things, right? Mm-hmm. And yet it wasn't some moment in time. How long has this been part of your approach? It sounds like it's been kind of for a pretty long time, maybe even at an early age.
Yeah, so I would, man, I mean, long as I can remember, high school. I mean, as far as I can remember back is high school, or even maybe younger than that. But like, I guess when I kind of started to formulate it, or consciously think about it, was maybe sometime in college. I think when I was working at GameStop. It's like I mean, not game crazy. It's similar to GameStop, but it was kind of like a sales role. So I always had to listen to people, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but looking back further than that, sometime it happened in high school, maybe, or probably before that. I would say, but I wish I could say like pinpoint it to a moment, but it always been there
Hmm.
to some extent.
Hmm. Did you have a question there, Rodney?
Um, more of a comment. I just think it's just fascinating how aware of it you are, and I think I've become more aware of it recently in the past 4 or 5 years, and it is a constant. I think I'm at a place right now where when I don't do it, or I don't do it well, I beat myself up. Um,
Mm,
but it's helpful hearing your journey with it.
Yeah, I think it's awesome how intentional you are about it, because and it is one of those things that is incredibly difficult. We all know, oh, listen more, and I think it is
mm,
fairly common in conversation or in media, a lot of things out there, but it is difficult, as you said, especially when you're fired up,
right, right.
when you get really triggered. I'm curious, as you say that, like, what are some of the things that trigger you the most, that make it most challenging for you to listen?
Ooh. I hate. I mean, yeah, I really dislike. I hate it. Actually, I hate when people cut me off, and not so
In a
much.
car or while talking?
Oh, no, no, no! Like in a Oh, you talking about in general? I thought you talking about within conversation.
No, no, no. I just wanted to make sure when you said cut you off. As
Oh,
I'm cutting you off to clarify the point. I just making sure it's not in a car or versus
I
in a
just want to see if I
conversation.
could
Yeah.
piss you off.
Can I trigger you right now?
well, yeah, but it's not like that, because it makes sense why you would want to clarify. But like when I feel
Yeah.
like people are intentionally cutting me off, and I think the reason why is because I feel like they have a lack of respect, or lack of care about what I'm saying. So almost it feels like I'm being ignored at the same time too, and that's particularly one of the things I hate when I'm talking and people are ignoring me. Those two things kind of drive me insane, and I think that cutting part when you cut people off, it's kind of a signal that like you're being ignored, and it drives me crazy. So it's funny because one of my really good friends, he was like, "I had no idea that you felt that way." 'Cause we were just having this general conversation about things that we hate, and he was like, "I had no idea you felt that way because people cut you off all the time." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I just a lot of things I think about is like it's just not important to say, at that moment, because it's like whatever." So it's a lot of me pulling myself back at times.
So that goes to my question. People cut us off all the time. Is there Does it matter who's doing it for you,
No,
for either of
anyone.
you?
Yeah, anyone that cuts me, and it's for any situation. Anyone who could cut me off, it would be, I would be annoyed by it. Even like when my daughter kind of cuts me off when I'm talking, I'll get annoyed by it. And it depends on the situation. I'll just say like, sometimes I will actively say after they finish talking, I didn't hear anything that you just said because you didn't let me finish my statement, which is being a little, a
Petty.
little feisty, petty, but yeah, anyone can cut me off and it would be annoying.
I
But it's
like that.
also probably true from a brain side. Like if you get turned on, if you get activated by someone not listening, then you probably don't physically hear what they're saying because you're like, "What this? You seriously?" Like you're in your head at that point.
Exactly.
Keith, do you have do you have a feeling about being cut off?
For me, it depends on how it's being done. Like, if it is, it, it really is one of those. If you're in the middle of a train of thought and someone just either changes the topic or jumps in and continues saying something else, maybe it is one of those moments of pause. And it's like I haven't finished my thought. It does have that feeling of, for me, the feeling is you're just not listening to me. Like you actually don't care about what I'm saying. Now I'm irritated. It happens most at home and with those who I'm closest with. I don't find it happens too often with people that I don't have a close relationship with. So that adds to the annoyance because it's like they're the closest people in your life. So you're naturally inclined to be annoyed with them anyway in some way for some reason, right?
So I'm thinking about it because I just had this last night with my wife and I. Like we got into a little bit, and we were just like, "Yo, I need a second." Like she got mad before me, and she needed a minute, and then I got mad after, and then I needed a minute. But in between, there was a moment of conversation, and the cutoff thing happened. And as I'm thinking about this, I too, Keith, have had like the shame thing where like, why am I more mad at my family than I would be some stranger doing this to me?
Yep.
But it's not equal. Like what happened was when she cut me off, I got hurt. Like because I was trying to convey, like the situation to me was very important, and there was something I was trying to say, and like of anybody on the planet that I want to listen is her. So when she when she cut me off, which I don't think she did it to hurt me, but it hurt. And so that what I've realized is the thing that will set me off is like when I get hurt. And I've always thought it was like the cutting off or like the usage of a word. And it's like none of those things. It's just how it imprints upon me.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. It's that feeling of, Devin, you said it, disrespect. It's the feeling that sentiment has on you for whatever reason that ultimately comes about. I align more on the hurt. Like, are you just not listening to me because you don't want to hear me? Like, do you just not care what I have to say? Because I'm trying to share something with you, or I'm trying to express something, and then I completely get turned away. And that's what it feels like, even though that's not it. You know, my wife is an extreme extrovert. She thinks out loud.
Yeah.
And some people say I think out loud. Like literally, if you've ever been around someone who actually thinks out loud, it's really confusing because you don't know if you're in a conversation or not. And that's my wife. And like I just inherently respond all the time. And 8 years later, I still respond all the time. And it's like, are you thinking out loud? You know,
the most helpful thing in the world was that for me. I just ask now that I just don't know. Like, was that for me or?
I like that.
It saved me a lot. Oh, go ahead, Devin.
And you know what I realized too, or I read somewhere, Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist. I don't know if you have ever heard of him. His books are great. He says that people don't think unless they're actually talking. Most people can't really think in their mind, so they have to talk to get these thoughts out. And and I think that's what's happening a lot of times. Like when we get cut off, maybe that people just trying to think through these issues, and they just have to say it out loud. So it's not, even I understand it's not a time, not even about me or them. You're not caring about how I feel about the situation or anything like that.
Right.
It's just they're trying to get these thoughts out because it might not come back anymore. So.
Which is like almost a fear of like there's what's coming forth from my mouth is pure genius, and for you to interrupt this might mean that this genius may never come forth because I may lose it.
Exactly.
Which is like a real fear. Like it's kind of messed up, but it's like, but it's real. How do you resolve it? Like when you get cut off by a coworker or a family member, do you just let it go? Do you engage? Do you get pissed? Like, what happens? How do you deal with it?
9 times out of 10, I'm gonna let it go. Because I understand it's not about me. Most things in this world aren't about the person that's being done to. It's about the person that's doing the thing. So I'm really aware of that. So most of the time I let it go, because there's just no point. Because always trying. My goal in life is always to focus on getting what I really want, and I always don't have to be right in the moment. At the same time, it's like I always focus on being right instead of getting it right. So I think at times, like if I were to engage and let them know that I'm upset about them cutting me off, which most time I'm not, but it's it's like me just trying to be right in the moment, and I don't have to be right in the moment. I want to get it right, down the road, or in the next minute or so.
So what does that look like from a response standpoint? Like so sometimes will you ever say like that bothered me, or that like I would like to finish this statement, or like what does that actually look like as you're trying to get it right?
Oh yeah, definitely. So I mean, it depends on the amount of times that it happened, like back to back, and then I'll just say like, hey, like you cut me off, or sometimes I will have to say, hey, I'm still talking, for them to realize, and most people will take it like, oh, like my fault, or my bad, most of the time, but those times where it's like like you were saying, Keith, you're close, the people closest to you, they don't care about that. They'll still keep on going. But yeah, that's what I kind of do to try to get it, to make them aware of that, because people have to be made aware because people just don't know sometimes.
Yeah. It really reflects the nature. And I think both of you are shining a light on the impact of ego in conversation and how much, I mean, as you said it, Devin, it's not about me. It's about the other person wanting to make a point or not losing that point because in that moment, that point is the thing for them. And they need to get that out or explore it
Right.
or say something about it. And it really is a challenge. Like
Well,
it
even
can
with
be a
that, Keith,
challenge just to let that go.
with that, like us all being fathers, like I sense it. I get it a lot when I'm talking to my daughter, and like she's ideas and thoughts, and she interjects, and we taught her how to say excuse me. So she's just like, that's my golden ticket. Like I'll just
And
say
then it's,
excuse me, and then proceed to
excuse
say
me, can I
whatever I
get your
want.
attention? Can I get your attention? Can I get your attention? Can I get your attention? Not right now. Can I get it now?
And then when that's happening, I go through this like, I mean, it depends what my mood is, what my sleep was, all this kind of stuff. But sometimes it's like, no, listen, child. And then I'm like, wait, what? Like, no, that's just like the framework that I grew up with. Like, she doesn't need to just listen. Because there's
Mhm.
only like, I don't know, there's only a handful of times when we're talking and she does it that like she actually needs to listen. Like there's something imperative, like we do need to leave right
Right.
now, or you need to
Yeah.
not step in that street, or you're gonna run into that. Um, but the rest of the time it's like, why do I need to talk right now? And that is a whole like ego trip that is just wild to be on. Y'all ever experience anything like that?
Definitely. Especially with my daughter, like it's, I realize, and I'm trying to be very aware of it, like that she is a person too. And I particularly, I think with parents, like parents don't treat kids like they're people at all. Like it's like we're just giving them all this information, especially it's and I think it's changing as the time's going along. But I definitely have those moments where I have to realize that like, oh, I'm over talking to her, and like she doesn't need to listen. Like it's just okay, and like things can just be, or I hear her thoughts. Well, also too with my daughter, she has open reign to ask me why for anything. You know, no matter what I'm telling her, she can always ask me why. And like my idea behind it is like I don't ever want her to blindly follow anybody, whether it be a man, some religion, or some boss or something. Like people have to explain why, because you have to understand. Which, in the same time, too, that it start making me think more, because she would ask me why, and she was like, particularly untie. I always say untie your shoes when you take them off. And she was like, why? And I couldn't think of a good reason why. And I had to, only thing I could think of, well, my dad told me that. And like that
Yeah.
was not, it wasn't good enough reason. So I was like, have at it. I don't care. Which fast forward 5 years, I just figured out why that it is important. So your shoes will be prepped by the time you can put them on next time. But we haven't crossed that bridge yet again. But yeah.
That question. No, I think that that's such an important tool. Like I love when my daughter, my oldest at this point, asks why constantly, because it challenges me to understand why I think something, or why something may be. And to the whole question, Rod, like absolutely. I especially have the why am I really, really irritated that you're ignoring me right now? Right? Like, can we just move past? And it's always a struggle. It's the hardest when things you like. We got to get going. Like we got to go to school, or we got to go to the doctor, or we got an appointment, or we got somewhere to be, or it's bedtime. And so like I need you to get your dress. Like we've got all these things. Um, but I try to regulate it when that's not the case. It's and just let it be. Like like there's
It reminds me of a Sadhguru, two quotes. One, he said, "A child is not a legacy; it's a life." And I think a lot of
Mm.
us treat children like they are like this. It's like, oh, it's the terrible name. Like you are. It's like, nah, it's a life. Like you said, it's a person. It's a human that's going to grow up and be their own thing. And then the other one is, our job is not to determine what's possible and what's not possible. That's up to nature. Our job is to strive. Like let
Mm.
them be what they're going to be. And it was a fascinating conversation because he was talking about like this concept of trying to not imprint try not to imprint anything on them other than letting them
Mm.
discover who they are, which is almost impossible. um
because you
I
kind
would
of
go as
have
far.
to. It is impossible. Yeah.
But it's like, how do you teach with the same time teaching how to evaluate? And I think that's one of the things my parents did really well, is like they let us question, even if they shut us down. It's like, no, like we just believe that. It's like we were allowed to question and have a thought on things most of the time.
But you said something a few minutes ago around people who were always arguing. You said, so what was that? What was that like? Like what was that experience? I want to take this into
Um.
how you parent your daughter, because I
Wait.
want to go down the parenting dad route here for a minute. In a minute.
Yeah. Um. When I say, well, I don't think people listen growing up like my parents didn't. Like, and then I was also the youngest of my brother and I, so it's a younger sibling complex as well. Which I'm not saying that it's not true, but yeah, I don't think that people listen, to me all the time, and definitely, people when I did say something, people thought that it was like wrong or way off, like irrational, almost with actually what people would say that it would be irrational. So even when I did talk and people would listen, it would be like, oh no, that's crazy or whatever. Which is really interesting and funny because it, in some ways it made me feel like I was wrong, for one, but two, that I just wasn't connected, to people. But particularly my grandmother, she always listened to me. And even my mother say now, like I used to just wake up talking, like all the time, like wake up in the morning and just start talking, which I was telling my wife that I did do the same thing. And it's just natural. I don't know. But when I was to that argument part or the argument, people are always arguing, either like my brother and I, my parents, or just people around me in the neighborhood. Because I didn't grow up in this really amazing neighborhood. I grew up on the east side of Detroit, like on 7 Mile, and what they call it now is like the red zone. um, one reason because it was at some point it was like the most people in America had got killed in that zip code, so it was just a lot of chaos. Seeing people arguing, all the time, kind of thing. So it's just something I always seen, and I could hear people go back and forth. I'm like, well, they're just not listening to that person. And I'm sorry for this long-winded answer. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, it's good.
Um,
Good answer.
But then how I kind of flip all that, to with my daughter is that I always try to hear her when she say things. I always ask her what does she want, and or not always ask her what she wants, but I try to make that like an active thing where I just want her to talk. And she actually told me a few years ago. She was like, "Dad, I love." She said something like, I can always talk to you," and I felt great about that because it was like I feel like I'm really working to something, like it's actually working. Because like being a parent, you don't really know if these things
Right.
are landing on the children or not. Like, but for her to have that moment of saying like, I feel like I can talk to you. I'm like, well, you can, and I told her she can always talk to me about anything, and I really feel that way. And I told her I'll try not to get upset. I can't always promise I won't get upset because I'm a human, but and yeah, so from the way I grew up, I try to just flip it, a little bit where I want her to play an active part in her life, or more of an active part in her life, by just me listening to her instead of her listening to me.
Mm.
What drove the perspective of, like, what was it that you were always irrational? Why was that perspective out there? Like, that had to have been tough.
Um, I mean, I can't say exactly what thing, anything or whatever, but yeah, I don't know, not any one particular thing. It just might be the process of how you look at something, or how do you think through, and which is still like, people tell me that I have like an abstract way of thinking, or I'm a
Yeah.
little esoteric at times, but it's funny now that
Uh, we
which is
feel that, man. We're there
yeah,
too. We're with you. Yeah.
which is funny now that so I previously worked at Google, and like once I got to Google, people start telling me that I always knew you were smart. I always knew that you were thinking well, and it's like, bro, relax. 2 weeks ago, you told me I was an idiot. I remember that. But yeah, so it's still like that to some extent, and I can see why, because I don't think like other people. Maybe overly thinking sometimes, like where I'm always thinking about concepts, thoughts, or whatever. At very random times.
A thought just struck me. I think what you're saying plays a lot into like allowing your daughter to ask you why, and that comment about them not being a legacy, like this, like not imprinting on them, I think is letting them ask why and letting them explain. My daughter's imagination is amazing. Like, I'm just like, I don't know where you even know those words from. And like, I think a lot of times we shut it down. Like, that's not real. That's whatever. And there is a genius to the child mind that is just abstract. It is different. It is not understandable to the human mind, which has been shoved into all of these contextualized boxes of rules and society and what is and what isn't. And kids have none of that. They're free from it. So like their minds are they're we probably, that whole 10% of the mind, we probably cultivate that in children by shutting them down. And you said that you felt wrong. Did you feel wrong, like 2 plus 2 is 5 wrong, like you were getting the wrong answers, or did you as a person at your core feel wrong?
Um, hmm. I mean, I guess maybe probably more so as a core as a person, that I felt wrong, probably. Um, but and it wasn't, but at the same time too, it's just like I start to just shrug it off, like, oh no, like I know what I'm talking about, kind of thing,
Mm,
within reason, which kind of just gave me more of a strength in my ability to see my vision. Like to always look down the road, to whatever I'm trying to get to. And it's like stubborn. It built a level of stubbornness, in me, I would say, which 100%, there's not any successful person to any means that don't have a little bit of stubbornness in them. So, in a way, like, and I was telling my mother this, that like, I'm grateful for all the things that happened in the past because it helped me be who I am today.
mhm.
Mm. How did
Completely
like,
agree.
there's a perseverance to your journey that I'm sensing, and when you lived in Detroit, was it referred to as the red zone then, or is that more after you moved?
Yeah, that's I guess like through high school on up. That's when it kind of started flipping because initially the neighborhood was a pretty good, really good neighborhood actually, and then it
Yeah.
just kind of went downhill right around actually right around like when I was about 12 years old.
How did all that shape you, along with this like stubbornness to think differently, and still being in it? I mean, that there's a lot in the dynamic around you, like
Yeah.
family, socially, all of that. Like, how has that played a role in your existence? And as you said, always trying to get better.
Yeah. So I guess how that all played a role was that I'm trying to make sure I say this correctly. So for one, like when the lucky, I was thinking about it after I had read a book, one of Malcolm Gladwell's books. I can't remember which one it was, but I was like, well, how did I end up so differently from all of my friends that I grew up with in the neighborhood? Like it really made me. Not to say I'm like this amazing successful person, but it's a difference. It is a difference. And one of the particular things, it was luck. Like for one, like where my parents decided to buy the house, it was on a corner house on a really busy street. So as the neighborhood started to go bad, we were shielded from the other side of the street where it went bad first. Because unless you're just wilding as a parent, or you're just totally careless, that you're not going to let your kid cross a major street. So from that little shield, we couldn't get over there. They couldn't get, to us as well. So by the time we got to be about 10 or 11, 12, we were kind of already set in our values, to the most part. So I just kind of got lucky in that part.
Mm.
But where the differences inside the home, kind of stuck with me, or, built to a level of me realizing I was different. For one, uh, everyone that lived in my house had a different last name than me. So they're all heirs. My mother, my brother, my grandmother. So I mean, well, I guess yeah. So my parents divorced. Forgot to put that part in there, but so they're divorced. So I always felt a little different because we had different last names, and then to another level, just the physically, they're all very light skinned or lighter
Mm.
black people. So I always look different and a different last name. And then going outside, oh, Devin, you talk differently. You don't talk like us. Then it was like they said, I don't think like us. So I always felt I was different, and they just for me, it became this thing where it's okay to be different because I am who I am. And it just, those kind of things really just help me, in life where it's like, well, of course you're different. Of course not people not thinking like you because you are different. And it just, built a nice shield around me where I can handle, things coming at me, all the time
Mm.
or it's okay for me to not be, or, it's okay for me not to be like everyone else because I've never been like anyone else. So like, why would it change now? Did I answer the question?
Interesting.
I don't
No,
think I did
no,
actually. Yeah.
no. I think you gave strong context, and I think it did. At what point did you become okay being different,
Uh, I
or
mean,
do you know?
I think it's a journey. It's not like I solved it, all now, So I think it's a continual thing that's still going on to some extent. It's just, some things that it's just easier to deal with. I think somebody was saying like, if you're into bike riding, you don't ever feel like it's never getting easier. You're just getting faster pretty much, and it's kind of like the same thing. Like I'm just getting better or faster at dealing with, these things and feeling different. So I can't say I have it all figured out, which is funny is the tough thing for my daughter because I see her thinking like we gaze a lot out the car window and I know and I said, ask her what she's thinking about and she'd say nothing. I used to answer this the same way as a kid. And which means I know that she's thinking about everything, but it's normal. So it doesn't seem like anything. And it's really kind of messed up that I can't tell her how to solve it because I'm still dealing with that that same thing too. It's just because it's part of who we are.
No,
Mm.
that's
Dang, that was almost poetic. Like I think
yeah.
even just having some recognition that she is, and just letting her, like, not making her, no, I know you're thinking about something, like, let's talk. Like, just giving that space to her and then with her knowing that she can talk to you if something comes up, like, she'll bring it to you. So I think that's a kind of a beautiful.
There is this.
Thing.
Rodney, you were talking about it before, and just that natural instinct, and I can feel it as a parent. Like, you're a child. I've got shit to do, right? Like, do what we need to do, and like, I get the inclination to say, well, that's just what we do, right? Like, I get the inclination to just answer, that's because I said so, which is not something I've ever said to my children, because it's a challenge, and it takes an immense amount of self-reflection, learning, self-awareness to fight those instincts, because that only perpetuates the cycle, right? Like, it only perpetuates your kids then grow up doing the same thing to their kids, and this is why generationally we are where we are in so much of the family dynamic, versus as you all put it, your kids are people too, which makes me open a question to both of y'all. At what age did you actively start treating your children like people and not like whatever they were at that age?
Well, we're going to take our pause there. I really hope you're enjoying this soulful conversation with Devin. It really reminds me of a conversation we had, episode 108 with Josh Adam, just the energy of it, the philosophical nature of it. So while we wait for part 2, feel free to go check out episode 108, and we'll be back with you in a couple of days.